Welcome everybody. I'm Helen Newby. I'm going to be your instructor this evening. I am a culinary nutrition student currently, and my background is 20 plus years in culinary arts and in the service industry, and I've done everything from private work to restaurant work to home chef, and a lot of that background has been in culinary nutrition. So that's why I've decided to join this program and kind of make it official, because it is what I love to do and it's what I'm passionate about. I consider myself sort of a natural food chef, so that is kind of my wheelhouse. So we are putting on this workshop tonight for AML, which is Acute Myeloid Leukemia, is the condition I've chosen. And I've chosen this because it's very close to my heart at the moment, because a good friend of mine's husband was just diagnosed, and part of the conventional medical treatment for AML is chemotherapy and radiation almost immediately, and he's on his third round of chemotherapy and having a hard time, and this is why I've chosen to focus my studies and this workshop on that condition, because of course I want to do everything I can to help, because that's what I do and that's why we're here and that's why I'm doing this. So I hope you all enjoy, and even if AML does not affect your life personally, I hope that we can take away some really healthful recipes and some new cooking techniques and just ways of sourcing food, and just a different way of kind of looking at what we're feeding ourselves and our families and how powerful food can be. So let's get cooking. So we're going to start with the first recipe, which is a smoothie, and it's a green smoothie with all ingredients that are meant to help this condition. So besides just feeding an AML patient foods that will help to reverse AML, we also want to feed them foods that will help them through the chemotherapy, like lots of B vitamins, which is going to help stimulate appetite and regulate mood and help with energy production and that sort of thing. So,
with what kind of vitamins?
B vitamins.
B vitamins.
Yeah. And well, actually, first let's give you guys a couple of little crunchy snacks. So we've made some roasted nuts, which I have seasoned with Himalayan pink salt and with brewer's yeast, which brewer's yeast is really concentrated form of B vitamins. So that's a great thing that you'll be seeing kind of throughout these recipes. It's something that we should all have in our pantry because it's nutritious and delicious, and this popcorn is also seasoned with that Himalayan salt and the brewer's yeast.
I like your serving dishes.
Thank you. Both cooked in coconut oil, which is medium chain fatty acid, which is a very healthy fat, which is something that we're also going to focus on in this workshop, and in general is just getting lots of healthy fats into our diet. So enjoy those. The recipes are in your packet. You can see. Okay, and then we'll move on to our smoothie. So, we're going to start with a cup of coconut water. And on the top of your notes, and something I'd like to emphasize is just that not every ingredient in your packet says organic, but as much as you can, as much as possible, buy organic. Because, you know, for me, it's like, why to go to all the trouble to eat healthy food and to live a healthy life if we're just buying products that are contaminated with pesticides and herbicides and chemicals and all these additives. So hopefully what you'll take away from this class, besides some healthy recipes, is just being more conscious of like the foods that you're buying and reading the labels and kind of knowing what to stay away from. So okay, so next on the recipe for the smoothie is collard greens, which a lot of people use kale in their green smoothies, but I've chosen collard greens because we're dealing with AML, and AML is a cancer of the blood cells and bone marrow, and patients with AML are in danger of kind of like bleeding out, and collard greens are extremely high in vitamin K, which can help with blood clotting. So that is really important there. But also just really high in calcium and sodium and sulfur and a lot of other great things. This, I've cut up 2 broccoli stems, peeled and sliced, which is kind of an interesting smoothie ingredient, but it's actually really delicious. And broccoli has a ton of vitamin C, which maybe you didn't know that broccoli would have a lot of vitamin C, but it does. And so anything that boosts our immune system is going to be really good for this condition.
Did you de-stem the cauliflower since it's so thick, or did you just throw that in there too, the stems for the cauliflower?
The broccoli?
No, for the cauliflower, like the vein down the middle.
Oh, it's collard greens.
Collard greens, I'm sorry.
Collard greens,
I'm
yes.
sorry.
Yes, I
Thank you,
did.
sorry.
Yeah, for all the greens and all the recipes, I did take the stems out, which, I'm going to stay on track a little bit, but that just reminds me that as we're chopping vegetables and everything, I'm going to be collecting all the scraps in this bag, which is what I do on a regular basis, and I keep the bag in my freezer, and then at the end of the week, that's what I use for my stock or my broth. So I boil it down. You can use bones or not bones, however you want to do it. Yeah, but anyway, that's the base for our soup today. Like I made a homemade chicken broth that way. I used the best stock bag that I had in the freezer.
I've never heard of the freezer thing. That's awesome.
Well, I just keep it there just so that
Smell.
yeah, and then they stay fresh because yeah, we're just gonna boil them down anyway. The next ingredient is a half of an avocado, and I have my avocado over here in this paper bag because when I bought them they were pretty green. And I don't know if you know that trick or not, but if you put avocados in a paper bag, they will ripen much faster than if you just leave them sitting out on your counter. So that's what I've done. They're coming out of that paper bag. So for our avocado, I'm just gonna go right down the middle. Be careful of your hands. And then twist. And then for the seed, might be a little green still, so I'm just gonna pop that out. An avocado is a great way to make a smoothie nice and creamy. So the broccoli stems are going to give it a little bit more water content. The avocado is going to give it that creaminess. And then of course avocado is another one of those amazing fats that we were just talking about that we want to get into our diet. And I don't feel the need to put that in my stock bag because that won't really give us any flavor when we boil it down. Okay. And then next I've done some sprouted sunflower seeds.
How did you sprout them?
I sprouted them using the sieve method. So you just soak your seeds overnight, and that's the same way I made those lentils we had last time we got together. But I soaked them overnight, and then you strain them out into a sieve, and then you put the sieve over your bowl that you just had them soaking in, and then with a damp towel over the whole thing, and then twice a day, once in the morning and once in the evening, you take your sieve and you rinse it under a faucet with clean water, and then make sure that your towel is damp over the top, and then twice a day. You do that in 4 days or so, and you'll have sprouted seeds.
Cool.
Yeah.
How about that again? Next time. Wednesdays.
Okay, next we're gonna use protein powder of choice, whatever you like.
What are you using?
I am using a collagen-based protein, which is something that I like. It's really nice for lubricating your joints, and it has a lot of the different benefits that you would find from gelatin or something like that. So good for your gut, good for your joints, good for your skin and hair and nails and all those kind of things. So next I'm going to put in some kelp powder, which kelp has is a good form of protein, extremely high in iodine. So helps with thyroid health, especially for me because I don't really use the iodized salt. I use the Himalayan pink salt, which I like because of the mineral content. but I'm not getting the iodine from the iodized salt, which is where most people get their iodine. So I prefer to get my iodine from different seaweed sources. Okay, and then the goji berries. So the goji berries, I have soaked them so they're nice and soft. They'll blend nicely because when you buy them, usually they're kind of hard as a rock. They're kind of hard, so you want to soak them. So we're going to put those in. And the goji berries are, they are a nightshade, which some people do have trouble with nightshades. But they are one of the highest antioxidant foods on the planet. So they are a powerhouse, a food powerhouse.
I didn't know they were nightshade.
Yeah, and they're a nightshade. Let's see how well this burns. Let's see. Get a little scrape down. Oh, and just back to the sunflower seeds for 1 second. I put the sunflower seeds in the smoothie recipe because they're extremely high in vitamin E, which vitamin E, as you probably know, just from childhood, is good for wound healing. You know, people put it on cuts and scrapes and burns and that kind of thing. Well, it's going to be doing the same thing in your body. So internally, it's going to help you heal all that vitamin E. And for people with AML, there's a lot of like bruising and, you know, that if they do happen to get a wound, it doesn't heal all that well because it's the cancer of the blood cells and they have a hard time with the blood clotting and all that stuff. So that's rat poisoning.
Yeah.
Okay, hand me some cups. Give you a little taster. It's just gonna be a sip.
To the neck.
Mmm. Smells delicious.
Hopefully it's sweet enough. I didn't add a lot of sweetener to it because of course we're dealing with a cancer here, and sugar is one of the top foods that we need to avoid. So it's not all about the foods that we're integrating into diets with people that are healing, especially from cancer, but it's also about foods that we're cutting out, and sugar is one of the big ones because that's what the cancer cells feed on. They feed on sugar. So if you starve out the cancer cells, they're not going to thrive and proliferate. They're going to die. So this is why when we're dealing with people with cancer, we want to immediately cut out all sugar, which is extremely hard to do, as we all know.
Yeah.
It's not
It's
bitter,
good.
it's not super sweet. It's natural taste.
It tastes like a delicious breakfast smoothie. Like you feel like you're drinking something you should
Well,
be.
I feel like without,
in a good way.
without all the sweetness, you're really tasting each ingredient. Like I can really taste the collard greens, and I can really taste the goji berries. And then you've got that coconut water in there for rapid hydration, for a little pop of magnesium, all those good things. Sorry. Okay, so, let's see. So the recipes that we're going to be making in the class, we're going to be doing my creamy wild mushroom soup with collard greens. We're going to be making a braised greens with a mix of collard greens, Swiss chard, And just because I just bought fresh beets and the tops look so beautiful, I decided to add the beet greens into our mix as well. So, you know, you can never get too many dark leafy greens, so we're going to add that in. So we're going to do our braised greens. We're going to make the mushroom soup, which can be a meal in itself, but it's going to actually be the sauce for our final recipe tonight, which is going to be a baked spaghetti squash dish with the creamy mushroom soup as our sauce and sauteed veggies. So in order to get there, let's start by chopping some veggies. I've kind of already gotten us started, but we're going to do some demonstration on some of these. And just by the way, some of the things I'm kind of moving out of the way, I have displayed out here just so my students can see some of the things that I buy and some of the things that I use. And you know, I know all this organic stuff it costs money, you know, it costs more money than the conventional, but for me it's so worth it. It's an investment in our health, it's an investment in our lives, and for me it's an investment that's worth making. So for me it's important to buy all organic. Okay, so I think we'll end with the onion because, as you can see by my onion goggles on my head, I'm anticipating this onion making me cry.
I thought you were going to crack oyster shells or something with a hammer.
What happened to our other two?
I think they're dealing with a little bit of a family
Maybe a baby issue?
situation.
Okay.
We have a new mom in the audience
Okay,
that got a
we'll-
phone call.
Okay, well we'll start with the mushrooms because I really want to show you guys cutting some of these other things. Not that you don't know how to cut, and I don't want to.
I don't assume.
to
Yeah,
cut.
don't assume.
I was gonna say I want to say this up front. I don't want to insult anybody's intelligence or assume that you don't have these skills, but we're just going back to basics here so that we're all on the same page. So
Awesome.
these mushrooms I just rinsed in cool water under the faucet. I took the stems out because I don't really want those.
How? Did you just wiggle them?
Yeah, I just wiggled them. They pop right out.
Okay.
And I don't really want the stems to be in my soup, but they're still full of flavor. So in my last stock bag, as you can see, I just started this one, but my last stock bag was topped off by all the mushroom stems. So I was just telling them that, you know, we're going to start with the mushrooms here, and I just kind of use my fingers under the water, getting, you know, just kind of scrubbing them off. Some people like to use a paper towel, you know, there's different ways of doing the mushrooms, but just so they're nice and clean. And so we're going to chop, we're going to hold our knife nice and firm like this. If you want to zoom in too, very first thing I did today when I was setting this up is I put this kind of damp cloth underneath my cutting board. So that's kind of a safety thing there that we're going to do. And I sharpened my knife.
Slide around.
Yeah, exactly. And I sharpened my knife because we want a really sharp knife. And then when we go to approach our vegetables, we just want to hold our fingers like, you know, like that. And hold them down on the veggie so that we're gripping the veggie, but our fingertips are out of the way. And so we're going to go right down into the vegetable and then back up. So it's like the motion of the ocean. So it's like waves. And just be careful, you know, we're not trying to win a race, especially when you're just starting out. It's more important that you don't cut yourself than to cut your veggies fast. And you can just do one at a time. You don't have to do two. Let's see, we're just going up and down, sliding forward and back, up and down. But a really sharp knife is important. I mean, it's nothing to be scared of. It's actually safer to have your knife sharp because when your knife is sharp, it's going to cut right down into your veggie. There's no risk of it slipping, because that's when most people get cut. Is when your knife slips off your vegetable and then it goes right into you instead of the vegetable. But if you have a nice sharp knife, it goes right into the vegetable and does its job. So I'm just going to get this done. I think my recipe's calling for like 4 cups of these, which I already have most of them done over there. We're just kind of finishing it up. Oops, man down.
That's what we need a doggy for.
Yeah, where's Milo at?
It's all right, we're gonna wash it off. No sense in wasting. I've heard some chefs say that you don't want to rinse your mushrooms because they already have a really high water content in mushrooms, and if you rinse them, you're just putting more of that water content into them.
I didn't know that.
But I don't really think about it that much. I think they cook up just fine. So for our wild mushrooms for our soup, we're using shiitakes and these beautiful crimini or button mushrooms. The shiitakes are a little more expensive, so it's probably like 3 to 1 criminis because, you know, we're all watching our budget. Okay, and then we're gonna go to the carrot. So we're cutting our ends off right into our stock bag. I'm just collecting. Okay, so I find the easiest way to cut a carrot, especially for a soup that we're just gonna puree, because it doesn't have to be perfect, but I do like for all of the cuts to be sort of uniform so that for even cooking. So when we go to puree, everything purees nice and smooth. So I'm just gonna cut my carrot in half this way, and then I'm gonna do it lengthwise as well. And the safest way to do that, I feel, is just to grip both sides and take your knife right down the middle. And this, again, that's where it helps to have a sharp knife, is because it's getting the job done for you there with no problem. Same thing on this one. And then face down on the board so they're flat. And then same thing. Up and down, back and forth, motion of the ocean. And like I said, we're not looking for perfection here. Just as long as they're about the same size, things are pretty uniform. Same hold with my hand that I did with the mushrooms. And you just kind of, you know, move your hand down as your knife gets closer. And then especially when you're just starting out, you kind of can slow your cut down as you get closer to your hands. Okay, those are the veggies I already cut, of course, so we're just gonna add to it. And these are all gonna go in the pot at the same time. And I like to start my onions first for soup, just so we can sweat the onions out a little bit before we add the rest of the ingredients. Okay, and then our celery. So if I was just cutting celery to eat raw, I would probably peel it. So they're a lot more palatable when you take the strings off. I mean, I've heard a lot of nutritionists say that veggie peelers are nutrient stealers, which I kind of believe that too, because a lot of the nutrients live in your peeling. But something as far as celery goes, like especially when you're feeding kids, like my 5-year-old, he's more likely to eat the celery if I take the peel off. So it doesn't.
Peel the celery. I had no idea you could peel it.
Yeah, you can either take your veggie peeler and do that down the back, or you can just take your knife and grab it here and just pull the strings off like that. But I don't think for soup that it's really necessary, especially since we're gonna puree the whole thing anyway. So for celery, same thing, just down flat on your board. But anyway, if you're making like a crudité, peeling your celery, it's gonna be a lot more palatable, a lot tastier, and people are gonna eat it versus it just sitting there on the tray. But celery, besides having a high water content, also has a high natural sodium content.
Huh.
And I was just learning that celery, like if you juice it, or I guess eating it too, but juicing it especially, if you can get that concentrated amount of celery, it could be really good for migraine headaches. So,
He also uses it as a preservative in meat. And it's I don't know.
yeah, you can cure meat with celery
As opposed to
powder.
nitrate.
So, okay, on to our
Good for
parsnip.
celery.
Are you guys familiar with parsnips?
Tell us
Only in my
more.
CSA.
So carrot,
Yeah.
carrot
Love
family,
meat.
but it's going to be a much starchier vegetable. It's kind of in the carrot family, but closer to a potato, because you can cook it up and it's very starchy. So it's going to be very high glycemic. So it's going to be really high. It's going to be quick to spike your blood sugar. So to have like a parsnip puree is going to be very similar in the glycemic index as to eating mashed potatoes or something. But if you put it in a soup, it's going to dilute it a lot. You're going to have a lot of other vegetables. It's going to be more digestible.
More
So-
of a thickener instead.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so with our peelings, we are going to peel the parsnips because they're not very palatable at all with the peeling on there. So we are going to peel the parsnips. So with that, you take your peelers, make sure you're steady there, and you just go up and down, up and down,
Up and down?
up and down,
Wow.
No idea.
right? right?
This is saving me hours of my life.
I've already learned more than.
Same on the back, up and down, up and down.
Wow.
And of course, this is a really fast way to peel potatoes too.
Up and down.
Up and down.
Amazes me every day.
So the recipe, I believe, called for 2 parsnips, but I did 4 because these were, these little organic ones I found, they weren't really that big, so we're gonna use 4. That's one part of cooking, I think, that takes a little experience, is just how, being able to read a recipe and being able to modify it just by knowing that, like, okay, this is calling for 2 parsnips, but I'm in the store and I'm looking at these parsnips, or I'm at the farmer's market and I'm looking at these parsnips and they look really tiny. So let's, kind of just common sense. Yeah, let's double it. Or if it's a vegetable or a fruit or an ingredient that you don't enjoy, just figure out what would be a good substitute for that.
That makes it easier.
Okay, so same thing with the carrots. Just like I said, these are in the carrot family, so we're going to cut them a lot the same way. But parsnips have this really fat end, which, like I said, we want to get the veggies pretty uniform. So for the skinny top end, I'm just going to cut them down the middle. But for this fat end, we're going to cut them in 3 chunks, like that. So when we go to cut them, they are going to be more uniform. So same thing, up and down, back and forth, motion of the ocean. Okay, same thing over here. Okay, I want you guys all to be in here for the onion because I want you to see how I cut this onion.
Yes.
And it's going to be entertaining how much it makes me
Oh,
cry.
On with the glasses.
Okay, see? I'm already
Safety
entertaining
first.
you. I'm already entertaining you with my goggles. Okay, so. So for the onion, it's got these 2 different sides. Okay, these 2 different ends. See this one where it's very hairy, that end, the kind of butt end? We want to keep that on. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut it. We're going to cut this other end off. Of course, right in the stock bag. Already started my onion collection there. And then,
the peel of the onion in the stock bag too.
yeah, all of it.
That gets me. Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
all of it. Okay, so same thing that we were doing with our carrot. We're just holding it on either side and we're going right in the middle with our sharp knife, right in half that way. And so this is how we're going to peel it. We want to get as close to the peel as we can because we don't want to waste too much, but it's going in our stock bag, so it's not really waste.
Like that.
Okay.
I agree. Yeah. If I could do it.
Right, because then when you make
I have chickens.
then when you make your stock or your broth, that can not only be the base for soup, but for sauces. If you have a cold or something, you've got that broth right there. It'll just be
Can we
simmering.
do that next class?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yay! How to turn your stock bag into stock.
And maybe that should have been a recipe in my packet, but they wanted to keep the recipe sort of limited because this class could be like 6 hours if I put all the recipes in it
We
that I
would be
wanted
here
to.
for all of
So, okay, so for our onions, we just lay them down flat.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna take our knife like this, flat.
Oh.
And you can do this to any level on the onion depending on how big you want your cut.
Uh-huh.
And we don't need them super fine, but if you want like a really fine chop for a recipe, you just go smaller. So see, we're just gonna do this twice. It's a pretty small onion. So we're just gonna go in there twice, slice it like that,
Oh.
and then we're gonna hold it like this.
20 years I've been doing it wrong.
See, and I poke the knife right into it so there's no chance of getting my finger right there. Same thing, all the way down, all the way down,
Wow.
all the way down.
Interesting.
See, all the way down, and then the same thing right here. We take our fingers back.
Wow.
And see, it doesn't have to be perfect. So like I said, we're just boiling it. Or we're gonna saute it and then boil it. But
What is like chopping left and chopping right?
Yeah, I just
Getting the
hack
ones
at
that I
it.
already
Mhm.
missed.
Yeah.
But do you see what that does? I mean, it gives us a nice uniform cut, and it was really easy.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
And we're just gonna put it all in there so it can contain the onion juices.
I'm gonna remember that one.
So what I've learned from my culinary nutrition class is that onions are a prebiotic. So you all know about probiotics, but a prebiotic is like it's foods that we eat that kind of like prime our gut. So our gut, I mean, it's almost even better than a probiotic. So I believe onions, and then like Jerusalem artichoke, which is also a really good food. Similar to parsnips in that they're a root veggie, but they're very starchy like a potato. So they can be a potato substitute, and they're not a nightshade. So for anybody that's sensitive to nightshades, they can have Jerusalem artichokes or parsnips, and it doesn't cause the same effect that a nightshade vegetable would.
Which they're like an anti-antihistamine, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to eat those.
But leeks, I just learned, are a really good natural antihistamine. So next time you are looking at vegetables, and I'm sure leeks come up in your CSA.
Oh yeah, the one in my fridge. It's her birthday.
So speaking of CSA, that was another thing I wanted to touch on in this class, and something that I am really trying hard to strive for in my own life is just like, you know, and something that I'm learning is that we talked about buying organics, but just kind of like realizing that there's different levels of organic. You know, there's organic that was grown in Mexico that, you know, took all sorts of energy to be flown here and sat in the processing plant for 4 days, 5 days, and then came to our supermarket and sat on their shelf for 8 days before we happened to go and buy it and put it in our refrigerator, and then it sits in our refrigerator for 2 or 3 days before we make it.
Are you saying that's not organic anymore?
No, I'm not saying that.
Well, it's
I'm not saying that it wasn't
Local versus
organically
organic.
grown. I'm just saying that's one level of organic. And then there's like, you know, the biodynamic farm that's 2 hours from your house that they have CSA boxes that they deliver to your house. The, you know, there's different levels
That
of
may not
organic.
be certified in
Right.
a certain way, but are possibly healthier than.
And I know living up here in the mountains, because we are up here at elevation in North Lake Tahoe, that sometimes that can be tough. But you know, there is a year-round Saturday farmers market in Reno. We have the Tahoe Food Hub, which is right down there at the Truckee Airport, that sources from all the local organic farms. So it is possible, and I know it's not possible for every product every time, but you know, just to kind of like have that in our mind when we're going to purchase our food for our recipes, you know, instead of just going to Safeway. Thank you.
No, it's cute.
Okay. We did the smoothie, we chopped the veggies. Okay. So we're gonna kind of multitask here. So we're gonna start 2 different recipes at once. So we're gonna start our soup and we're gonna start our greens, because the greens need 30 minutes to braise. So we wanna get those going pretty quickly, so that we have everything kind of coming out of the oven and out of the pots all at the same time for us to enjoy for dinner.
I can never manage that when I'm cooking more than one dish.
Well, right, and that's just something that takes experience and it takes, you know, planning and all that. But I think, you know, it's doable for sure. It's doable.
Would you say what's the number one thing to make that happen? Like prepping everything that doesn't need to be cooked first, so they can just put them on the heat when you're ready.
Totally. I'm a big fan of the whole mise en place thing. Like when I'm cooking, I like to have like, I go through the recipe, and if I'm using a recipe, I read the entire recipe before I even start, first of all. And then I prep all the ingredients instead of going down, oh, I need, you know, 2 cups of this and a tablespoon of that as I go.
Whatever.
I like to prep everything ahead of time, and then when it comes to executing my recipe, then it's just boom, 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 and things happen quickly and all that. So this is going to be our soup pot here, and then this is going to be the pot we start our greens. So these are always great things to have in your kitchen, is a couple of nice stock pots. And for me, no aluminum. I only use ceramic, cast iron, stainless steel, glass, because you know, whatever you're cooking in, whatever that material is, you're gonna end up eating it. You're gonna end up eating it. So do we want to be eating aluminum?
You said cast iron.
Cast iron, ceramic. So these both have a ceramic coating. They're
Great.
stainless steel with a ceramic coating. If you had a nice glass pot, that would be great. Cast iron, anything like that.
Awesome.
So,
Thank you.
so you know, cooking and being healthy is not just a matter of the ingredients. It's what we're cooking in, what we're cooking with, the water that we're using. I mean, there's all these different levels of health. So let's start our pots, both of them. I'm going to put them both on kind of a medium high heat. Get our oil going. So I think for either of these recipes, coconut oil or ghee would work just fine. And I just happen to have both because I made a fresh batch of ghee last night. So we're going to use coconut oil for our soup, and we're going to use ghee for our greens.
So you make your own ghee.
Yeah, and it's probably the easiest thing in the world to make.
Tell me more.
And some of the things like the ghee and the stock I didn't put in the packet just because I feel like they're recipes that are easily Googleable. But you know, it might just be some things we need to put into another workshop. Or recipes, you know, that I could email to you after the fact. Yes, please.
Well, so we'll just make class a regular thing.
I think so. This is the idea, right? This is why I'm doing this. Okay, so ghee's going into one. Coconut oil into the other pot. So, I mean, back to like the multitasking. I mean, I think that to be a good cook in general, you have to be a good multitasker. Little ghee on my hands, no problem.
Rub it
Just
in.
Rub it in. It's a great moisturizer. Okay, so our coconut oil is melted, so we're going to go right in with our onions. Same with the other pot. That's what we're starting with. We're starting with our onions. Give it a little stir. Maybe we should get some light on here. Give it a little stir. Same with this pot. So I have 2 cups of chopped onions for the soup starter and 1 cup for the greens. Get it right into our pot. That is like one of the best sounds in the world as a cook. Okay. So basically we just want to saute these until they start to sweat. And that's going to be a pretty obvious thing. I mean, you'll see. I mean, this pot's already starting.
With the extra
We have it a little
condensation.
hot. Yeah, exactly. It'll just start to soften a little bit, start to sweat.
This already is smelling delicious.
What do you think? Are our onions sweating?
I think this one is definitely sweating.
Okay. Give me a stir right here too.
Yes. They're releasing more condensation.
Oh, yeah. I just always thought that was the butter or the coconut oil.
Okay, so with the soup pot, we're gonna go right in with the rest of our veggies now. All of them, including all of these wonderful mushrooms. So mushrooms are a really naturally high source of vitamin D, which is why I chose this recipe for my cancer patient, is because we're trying to stimulate his immune system. You know, we're trying to give him foods that are rich in vitamin D and vitamin C and all the different B vitamins that help to stimulate the immune system. And what I'm just learning about mushrooms too, that they're not just immune stimulating, but they're immune modulating,
What does
which
that
means they're sort of like directing the immune system. So instead of just giving the immune system energy to do its job, it's actually sending messages to the immune system, telling it what it needs to be doing at that time. So
Wow.
with somebody that's sick, they're directing the immune system to go after whatever is making them sick. Okay, so these onions are looking really good. So let's go in with our greens. So these are the chopped Swiss chard, actually more like a rainbow chard. And
The beets are in there
and the
too.
beet tops.
I didn't know I could use my beet tops
Oh
as
my
well
God.
in my greens.
yeah, they're
I
not
love
only
beets.
nutritious, but they're delicious.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Okay, we gotta save a little bit of collard greens for our soup. We need 2 to 3 cups of these collard greens for our soup. You want to show them closer on those collard greens. They're so beautiful.
Wow.
And like we talked
so
about
deep,
earlier,
the
I just
color.
take the stem out. I just use my knife, but you can just pull the stem right out from the green. So I de-stemmed them, and then I just did a nice little slice, about 3/4 of an inch wide. So we're just letting our greens kind of mix with the oils at the bottom of the pot and the onions, just until they're hot. And yes, I am using my hands. So I'm kind of a believer that like these are some of a cook's best tools, is a clean pair of hands. The pot is a little bit hot though, so you can use a little mitt or something. But you see how the greens are quickly starting to reduce in size?
Drastically.
Drastically. We can even add a little bit more of the collards, because I don't think I'll need that many for the soup. I do write recipes and I do follow recipes, but I am not always the best at measuring. I kind of don't have a problem most of the time with just eyeballing, but you know. Okay. Let's go over here and give this guy a stir too. I turned the heat up a little bit since we just added a lot more bulk. So we want these to really start cooking down before we add the liquid. We're gonna let these cook for a few more minutes and then we're gonna add our seasoning.
What's the seasoning?
Seasoning is just going to be shiitake mushroom powder, Himalayan pink salt, and some ground white pepper. And then we're going to do some fresh garlic cloves. So as soon as I get the greens going here, we're going to demonstrate some chopped garlic as well. I got 2 nice big cloves there. So yeah, this is the shiitake mushroom powder I used. I've already portioned it out, but that's just a good example. I've used porcini mushroom powder before too, and that's really good. Okay, so I need a cup of broth, I need a tablespoon of this. Okay, so once our greens are nice and kind of hot and incorporated with the oil and the onions, then we're gonna add our other ingredients. So we need a tablespoon of the apple cider vinegar.
And is that just for health benefits or?
Health and flavor. I always buy the apple cider vinegar with the mother. So that's a really good fermented food, so really good for your gut.
Huh. Scoby?
Yeah, you can see her down there.
Oh, holy moly.
I've never heard of that either.
That's the mama.
I know
so,
nothing, guys.
flavor
I
as
know.
well.
It's a fermented.
so I really wouldn't even bother with apple cider vinegar if it doesn't have the mother, because it's not gonna have the fermented probiotic benefits.
Making notes.
Apple cider vinegar is also great for like weight management.
I really
Okay.
like your measuring spoons, by the way.
So, oh thanks, I got those in Turkey.
Those are so cute.
So we're gonna add a little bit of sweetness to this. I'm gonna use this organic maple syrup, but you can also use raw honey or whatever other sweetener that you like. Those are my 2 favorites. I'm just going to use about a half a tablespoon. But once you do this recipe a couple times, you'll kind of get to know what you like, maybe a little more.
Is it to make it sweet or is it to cut out bitterness or
It's just a balance.
balance?
Yeah, because once
Love
in the
that.
final product, you're not really going to taste the sweetness,
Right.
but it's going to balance the onions and it's going to balance the apple cider vinegar.
How interesting.
And there's some nice benefits to maple syrup too, as far as mineral content.
Huh.
But of course, not all maple syrup was created equal.
I was gonna ask that about honey also.
Okay, and so we're gonna use. I'm trying to refer to my recipes because I'm trying to be better at measuring. 'Cause like I said, I write recipes, but I don't always follow them. Okay, so this is a half a teaspoon of Himalayan salt. And about a quarter teaspoon of ground black pepper. I'm just gonna go straight from the grinder. Not really gonna measure too much. And then I like to use a little bit of red chili. So again, the balance. So it's going to be the acid, the sweet, the spice balance.
We have to say we love your apron. Is that something you made?
Oh, thank you. No, I bought this on chefworks.com.
It's so cute. I
It's
thought you were
something that
wearing.
I found at a restaurant on the Oregon coast. We went out to eat, and it was this great restaurant right on the coast. And all the expediters wore these cool aprons with the suspenders, and all the servers wore the half aprons. And anyway, I got online that day and
It looks comfortable.
had to get my
and
own. So this is my
adorable.
chef apron, and then I wear the half apron when I wait tables.
Aww.
Okay, so that is the beginning of our greens. So from here, they just get turned down and set to simmer for about 30 minutes. So I'm actually going to move those over here to my induction burner so that I have some more stovetop space because we are going to do some more sauteing. We want to have lots of room for that. Okay, so I'm going to start that. And we'll just have to remember to come back and stir those greens occasionally. Okay, so this is looking about ready for all the seasonings and the garlic. So real quick, let me demonstrate the garlic. Every good cook needs to know how to cut garlic. So for me, not all cooks do, but I like to cut the little butt end off of the garlic before I smash it. So I cut the little butt end off. Even that goes in my stock bag.
Ooh,
Very
nice to
frugal.
know.
Okay, and with the garlic, just put it down flat like that. Knife right on top. You just take the palm of your hand and smash it.
Wow.
That's how we get into our garlic.
Wow.
Same thing right here too. Palm of our hand right down on there. And then we chop it. Same thing as we did with the mushrooms and the onions and the carrots and everything else. Grip our hand down. Up and down, back and forth. Motion of the ocean. That's kind of a safety trick too when you're chopping, especially really fine things like herbs and garlic, is that once you get the main chop done, you can go back across it and get the chop a little bit finer, but just hold the back of your knife. Don't even put your hands down on the board. So hold the back of your knife and go up and down like this, and you'll get a little bit smaller chop out of the deal. Okay, we're just gonna scoop that up with our knife and right into the pot. And then over here, I've already measured out our other seasonings, the mushroom powder and the salt and white pepper. So it's gonna go right in. And of course, it's not in the recipe, but any kind of fresh herb I think would be welcome right now too. If you wanted to add parsley or a little bit of thyme leaf or marjoram, something like that would be welcome here too. So I didn't put it in the recipe because I don't think it's totally necessary, but I don't think there would be anything wrong with that. Okay, and so now that that's all incorporated, we've got our seasoning in there, our fresh garlic. Now we're going to turn the heat up to high, all the way up to high, and we're going to add our broth. So this is about 6 cups of homemade chicken broth. Right in.
Well, next week's
Right.
So go on buy one of those right now, guys. Those big.
Oh, I know, I have a cooler, not a neat.
And for me, it's important to get the heat up to high before you do that because in most cases your broth is going to be cold out of the refrigerator, or if it's a boxed broth or something, it's going to be at room temp on the shelf. So you don't have to sit here and wait because we're gonna let that come to boil before we even do our next step there. But before we do, we're gonna put a couple of bay leaves in. So really, I mean, I know exactly.
It's classic.
And I really don't think soup is soup without bay leaves. I mean, they add a lot of flavor, and I like bay leaves a lot. You can even grind these in a spice grinder and add them to different spice mixes, especially for meat, and they give really good flavor. But I mean, just smell these. Just smell. Here, camera woman. Smell those. Yeah, I mean,
Some of this
Love.
is just like my Russian grandmother. It's just like tradition passed along. The bay leaves for sure.
But how long will a jar like that be good and still have good flavor?
I think a long time. I mean, especially if they're organic and unirradiated. That's another thing I learned in school is that they'll actually expose spices to radiation. So if you're not, turn that down.
Yeah, I think we're good. Exposed of radiation. What was that?
If you're not buying your spices organic, there's a chance that they were exposed to radiation.
That's frightening.
Fantastic.
I know.
Right?
Like, there's a
Right?
learning a little too much.
Okay, so we're gonna put
Mine
the
are
lid
so
on.
good.
We're gonna put the lid on there so it can come up to boil. And we're gonna let it boil before we turn it back down. Anyway, let's rinse our board.
And we are in elevation, so that takes a little bit longer.
6 degrees, 30.
Okay, before we do anything else, we're gonna continue to multitask by preheating the oven for our squash. So we're gonna go all the way up to 400 for our oven. That's just out of habit because
Make sure there's nothing.
make sure there's
there.
nothing in the oven. I've done that before. I melted some things that way. Okay, so spaghetti squash, one of my favorite foods.
I'm excited to see how you cut this because I don't know how to do it. I've tried many times, it does not go well.
But since I'm gluten-free, I don't typically eat a lot of pasta because, you know, most traditional pasta has gluten and most gluten-free pasta is not the best. So this for me is like a really fantastic substitute for pasta. I just made like a fish piccata last night and I used this for the noodles. So good. So, so good. Still working on my smoothie. Okay. So, again, why a sharp knife is really important.
Yeah.
So what I do is I just go straight down in the middle with my knife. And you see how it's kind of popping? It doesn't have to be totally even. It's usually not going to be because it's got that hard stem and you're not going to be able to really cut through that stem. I mean, I'm sure there's some knives that would be able to do it, but probably not this one.
Okay.
See, and then it'll just kind of bust open like that.
Huh.
Okay, and then we want to take out the seeds. And if you're feeling ambitious, you can separate the seeds from all this inside stuff, and you can roast your seeds for a snack. So I've done that before. You may not be doing that tonight, but I've done that.
If you don't, does it go in your stock pot?
No, because it's mostly just fiber. You know, it's really not going to give us any flavor. Like everything that goes in that bag, we're looking to extract the flavor from it. And so especially parts of the mirepoix family, which are carrots, onions, and celery, want to go in that bag. But I also put things like asparagus or garlic or mushroom stems, or I'll even put lemon peels and apple cores in there because it's that balance of flavor we were talking about. So when you go to do your broth, the apple cores give your broth a little bit of sweetness, the lemons give it a little bit of that acid. I don't use limes though because I feel like limes have a really bitter rind.
Interesting.
And so they don't boil down as well. But ginger, because I buy fresh ginger root a lot. That's a staple in my fridge, in my kitchen, in my life all the time. So I put it in my water, in my tea, I cook with it. But when you're peeling your ginger, that can go in your stock bag, and that's really great.
Huh.
Speaking of peeled ginger, a little tip for you. When you buy fresh ginger, you can peel it and freeze it. And so when you pull it out of the freezer, it grades really easily. So if you just want to like top a stir fry with it or grate it onto like some sort of sweet, like it's an amazing cake topper. If you want to top your cakes with freshly grated ginger, that's a good way to do it, is to freeze it first.
I had no idea. That's freezing that and the compost, but freezing is a new avenue for me tonight.
It's usually frozen when I buy it. So.
I've been freezing a lot. I made some chili and made a big batch.
I'm meaning to. Sounds great.
Pressure cooker.
Uh-oh, I'm having technical difficulties again.
What you got over there? What you got over there? A whole nother.
Yeah, that's my induction burner. It just doesn't seem to like that. So maybe we'll put it on the stove again. So we have to have that stay hot. Soup's looking good. Okay, so for our spaghetti squash, what we're trying to do is we're just trying to steam it in the oven. So I have a prepared baking dish here with a little purified water at the bottom.
Huh.
Purified water being important here, well, everywhere. But here, because it's actually going to be steaming up into your squash, so you want it to be good water. But we're going to add a little salt. That'll help the steaming.
When you say purified, do you mean like distilled, or do you mean like Arrow Creek, like, you know?
I mean,
Or do you boil it?
I'm not a big fan of bottled water. I mean, I use a Brita. I know that's not perfect, but, you know, reverse osmosis or something like that. But just, you know, whatever you can. Something out of your fridge. If you have a refrigerator with a water filter, just as long as the filter's clean. Yeah, so face down in the water, because the water's going to boil. We're going to steam our squash this way. And, okay, so here's another one that might blow your minds.
Here's another that might blow your mind.
Mind blown.
We're going to wrap our baking dish that's going in the oven. We're going to first put plastic.
I got it.
Wow.
First put plastic,
And this can go in the oven?
as long as you have aluminum foil over the top.
Interesting.
Trouble.
So the aluminum foil allows the plastic to go in the oven.
Is there anything else you cook this way? With the plastic and the oil, or just it's new?
Yeah, you can do like casseroles or lasagna or anything
the
that
moisture.
you want to get started this way.
Okay.
And then you would actually, you know, if you were making a casserole or a lasagna or something, then you would remove it with still some cooking time to go, so it would brown the top. But this is going to speed up your cooking process right there a lot. So I'm just kind of tucking it to make sure there isn't a lot of plastic exposed. Because aluminum, I don't use a lot of aluminum, but I do use a little bit of aluminum foil this way. But the plastic is kind of the barrier from the aluminum in the food, and then the aluminum is what's keeping the plastic from melting in the oven. So,
Do you think it would do the same thing for bees wrap, or should I just experiment and light my house on fire? The bees wrap that's like a substitute for the saran wrap. That wax coated. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. If it protects that, I mean,
I would think the heat would melt the
I'll
wax.
take one for the team.
I mean, I would think the heat would melt the wax, and then the wax is going to be in your food. But
Yeah, that's what I think
that's
too.
what I would think. But I don't.
You could do plastic wrap and then the beeswax and then the boiled heat tray after it, just for the experiment.
Or just not actually have food in it and just test it.
There you go.
So I decided to go ahead and chop all the veggies for this next round, because you guys probably saw enough veggie topping. And these are pretty easy, pretty basic stuff. Just red pepper, cauliflower, broccoli, and some zucchini and yellow squash. But this is going to be for our final dish. So this is going to go with the squash. So since it's a lot of vegetables to saute at once, I know I'm moving things around here, but that should work, because they both just have to simmer. Okay, so this is starting to boil.